Hey everyone, I hope you're doing great, following the 3H's of the channel, and in this video, it's all about weird encounters and weird stuff to happen in Alaska. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, pull up a stump with me, and let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. So something weird happened back when I lived in Alaska for a few years. I already knew that my chances of getting wrecked by the supernatural were already kind of high just living there and other things that I've seen. But when this happened, I had just bought a Subaru Legacy. I was driving alongside the Seaward Highway at 11 p.m. There were a few cars here and there. It was a pretty windy night too. Suddenly, the Legacy is giving me issues. The headlights keep flickering, turning off for seconds at a time. This is a big fat no on a dark winter night in Alaska. I pull over into a lot, which is basically this huge gravel pit for cars to stop in situations just like this one. As I'm pulling in to a stop, the car makes a terrible noise. So I shut it off. I pop the hood, and I walk out with the old glove box flashlight. I stand up the hood, and I hang the flashlight over top of my engine. Both hands are free. I'm just standing over the engine, doing quick scans, because maybe something burst, maybe something came undone. I wasn't huge into cars at the time, but I knew some basics due to where I was living. Suddenly, the flashlight gives, and I grab it, and I start swearing because I'm already mad about other things, and now this happens. But then I hear something weird. It sounds like a loud mechanical clicking behind me. It sounds like it's on the polar opposite of the lot. I'm basically on top of the road. I realize that I haven't heard a car or the wind in a long time. The whirring sounds like a roller coaster tugging a train of cars up an incline. There's enough light off the moon to look back to my car so I can feel back to the driver's side, and I can sort of crouch into the direction of the sound. Suddenly, my eyes begin to water and sting. The flashlight comes on in my hand. The switch was in the off position. I shine the light on my watch. Suddenly, it's 2 a.m. There's cars passing behind me. I realize the noise is gone. I close up the Subaru, turn it on, and it's fine. It drives fine. I'm not really superstitious, and I'm pretty skeptical about people with missing time, but I never figured out what happened. I never figured out what happened between the hours of 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. and why I wasn't even cold, why the flashlight suddenly died, why my engine died. What the hell happened out there? I used to live in Alaska, near Fairbanks, at Eelson AFB. My house was built on the site of a small plane crash, and about a mile away was a World War II bomber crash. Look up Lady of the Lake, Alaska, if you don't believe me. My sister had this doll named Heidi. It was one of those cheap plastic ones. No batteries, one dress. Her friends come over. They play with the doll because they're all kids, like 4th graders. They dress it up and they leave it in the kitchen. And then they go back to get the doll, and it's missing. Somebody, or somehow, it's ended up in the basement. Now, her friend that found it down there finds it naked and can't find the clothes. A few months later, though, everybody eventually forgets about it. You know, not much else happens. Everything returns to normal. But then, after Dad gets deployed, Mom hears laughter during the night. All the kids are asleep. The dogs are asleep. This doll named Heidi, is now on the stairs with its arms and legs taken off, and the clothes are missing again. Mom takes it, blames it on us kids playing a prank on her, and just whips it in the basement again. My sister's friends come over a few weeks later. They're down in the computer room. They're playing some game on Windows Vista. I believe it was the space pinball game that comes with Windows. And then they heard a noise from the closet. One of her friends opens it. There's nothing in there. All of them kind of just try to brush it off, try to keep having fun. Eventually, they go upstairs to get snacks and food from the upstairs pantry. When they come back down, they find the doll, Heidi, sitting on the computer chair. Again, this doll has no batteries, has no electronic parts, but its eyes are glowing. Eventually, we ditch the doll at Airman's Attic, which is basically Goodwill, but in Alaska. No one takes it for almost a month. The last I heard, they throw it away. This was the last I've heard of this doll. I really hope that nobody else ends up with it. This happened in the summer of 2018, August to be exact. One evening, we decided to go camping. We followed this dirt road that's off of another side trail that generally only trucks or four-wheelers could navigate. We found our perfect, secluded spot. Only one way in, pretty far away from anybody else. The feeling was like we found our perfect little pocket of the forest. So we make our fire, we roast hot dogs, the whole camping experience. Nighttime rolls around. We're both laying down on the air mattress in our tent, talking, starting to fall asleep. We slowly quiet down and begin to drift off. And then I hear a twig snap outside of our tent, to the left of me. My boyfriend heard it too. We're thinking that it's gotta be a bear. It's 3:30 in the morning, and it's Alaska. It's definitely a bear. He grabs the bear spray, I ring the bear bell, and we sit and wait to see if we hear anything else. We live in Alaska, so like I said, the possibility is very high it's a bear, especially with how remote we are. Some time passes. We hear a low rumbling sound, this time to the right. My boyfriend also hears it. Again, we wait it out. We aren't really sure if our minds are just playing tricks on us now. He keeps thinking he hears something, and he asks me if I did too. But I couldn't hear anything, but my hearing's also bad, so I just said I didn't. Eventually, he has to pee. I'm scared, so I ask him to stay near the tent. He gets outside, shines the flashlight around at the woods, and he sees an orange light flicker in the woods, away from where he came from, like a reflector. But there's only one way in. At this point I'm thinking, great, Lord help us. He decides to start the fire back up, so I get out to help, just so we can see around us better. One of the first things we noticed was that what we thought was a reflector was in a different spot now, right in the middle of the woods, not near the trail. We had originally thought that maybe it was a truck of somebody else trying to screw with us, but it blinked, and that's when we knew that it was eyes that were looking at us and glinting orange. And while we're trying to figure out what to do, trying to build the fire back up, we notice that 2 of the 4 ties that hold the top of the tent to the stakes have been untied. Not the stakes coming out of the ground, but the knots themselves on the stakes have been untied. We tripped on them several times during the day and purposely secured the knots before lying down to go to sleep. This is really ticking off all the alarm bells. There's a sense of immense fear and adrenaline at this point. Orange eyes. Our tent has been untied. We immediately begin to pack up everything as fast as possible with our truck high beams on and the engine running. The whole time, those eyes keep changing where they are. Sometimes they're at the back of the tent. Sometimes they're far off in the woods. And one time in particular, they were just outside the firelight. It was just watching us the whole time. We eventually got all of our stuff in the truck. Driving back out was hell because it was so far out and it was so dark. The terrain was so rough and we couldn't go fast. After what feels like forever, we eventually make it out back to the road. The realization sets in just after that we were either in a hills have eyes scenario, or we were about to be possessed, or worse. What do I make of any of this? Has anyone been through something similar? The spot was an extremely remote and very thick forest. The adrenaline that I felt trying to pack up as fast as we could literally felt like it was instinctual, like it was a survival mechanism. I felt that I was in imminent danger. We wanted to be away from people. I guess we got our wish. From now on, we use campgrounds only. We still don't want to be too near people, but we still don't want to be remote like that anymore. So I don't really tell stories or post them or send them in anywheres, but I'm going to try and reiterate a story that my auntie told me. She has no idea how this even happened, so I'm hoping that somebody can tell me. Anyways, her and her older sister live up in Alaska. Their parents like to go out and explore nature a lot. They would always come back and tell them about an amazing thing they saw, like a frozen waterfall or a crystal clear lake, or some other cool thing, I don't know. It made my auntie and her sister very curious, like all children get when they hear about cool things. One day, their parents go out for a walk or hike again because that's what they do sometimes, just to pass the time. They tell my aunt and her sister to stay in the house because Alaska's pretty dangerous when it wants to be. However, my aunt and her sister did not listen. Once their parents left the house, they followed behind, far away enough so that they wouldn't get spotted, because they wanted to see all the cool things that their parents saw. Worst case scenario, they would get caught and they would have to go home and probably get a spanking. They follow a distance away and they sort of try to make sure that they're not spotted. They stumble upon a pathway that's not merging with their parents. They've been outside in this area before. She said that they knew that pathway, that they had taken it on some walks when the whole family would go together. It was just a matter of trying to be sneaky that the pathway did eventually merge with their parents. Anyways, after 5 minutes into following this path, they can't seem to see them in the distance anymore. They try to rush ahead to see if they can find them, and then all of a sudden, everything goes black, and they end up on top of the mountain. The bad news was, for some reason, her sister was now hanging off the ledge of the mountain, hanging on for her life, with nothing but a small stone to rest on, no bigger than their hands. I remember, they're children, their hands are tiny. They begin to panic, and all of a sudden, the roles reversed. She was now on the cliff, and her older sister was standing over her. My aunt explains that the only reason that she didn't help her sister was because that she was too weak, and she didn't want her sister to rely on her and fall because of it. Her sister says that she understands, and that she was kind of hoping that they were in different positions because she knew that she could pull up my aunt easily in comparison. My aunt said it's weird because the moment that they both thought they wanted to reverse roles, they did. They reversed roles in an instant. Suddenly, it came over them that they were on top of a mountainside. They were panicking, but they thought that if they followed the same path back, they could maybe find their parents. So they do so. They follow the path downward, and they know where they're going. And suddenly, they're back on the path at the beginning again. The one that they were once on, before everything went dark and they ended up on top of the mountain. They rush back to the house and tell each other that they shouldn't tell their parents about anything that happened. They wouldn't know any better. Suddenly, their parents are walking up the pathway to the house. They open the door. My aunt and her sister ask why they're back so early. Their parents are confused. They respond that they've been gone for over 3 hours and begin to tell their stories of what they found on the hike. My aunt and her sister never told their parents because they were scared to get in trouble. She says it was the weirdest thing ever that she lost 3 hours in a mere 15 minutes. I hope someone can tell me a bit of information, if they can, about this. She's pretty into the supernatural ever since that moment, and I say that because she's attached to a lot of supernatural activity, mainly with spirits. I don't know if that has anything to do with it now, but information is good. I live in central Alaska, a small town surrounded by undeveloped wilderness for hundreds of miles in every direction. During the winter, we get very little light, even during the middle of the day, and this is something that happened in 2014 in early February. Me and my friend Scotty were out snow machining about 3 hours away from town. We were relaxing and having fun for a day, not hunting or camping or traveling anywhere in particular. We had been out for a while, and it was cold and getting dark, so we decided to try and head back. About 15 minutes in, my snow machine dies. No sputtering, no clunking, no outward signs of anything wrong before a sudden engine failure. Scotty hears my engine die, stops and comes back to help. We pop the hood and start looking around to see what the problem could be. As we do this, the sun sets and the darkness sets in. I pull out a flashlight so we can continue to examine the engine. It wasn't out of fuel. The oil was relatively fresh. There was no previous engine trouble earlier that day. We can't figure out what's wrong. I'm starting to get frustrated. It's cold, dark, and we are in the middle of the woods. We didn't bring much food beyond a few snacks, and we didn't bring a tent either. We decided to abandon my snowmobile for the night and attempt to two-man it back into town on the one remaining vehicle. No more than 5 minutes later, Scotty's snow machine dies under the same circumstances. While inspecting the second engine, I notice a pale light in the forest. It doesn't look like an electric light. It's not flickering like a flame. I point it out to Scotty, who looks, sees, and goes silent. It's too dark to see him clearly, but I could tell that he was holding his breath. After some time of mesmerized staring, we noticed that the light was gone. It was as if it had faded so gradually that we barely noticed it go. I tried to return Scotty's attention to the engine, but he seems completely disinterested. He suggests now that we seek shelter in the trees around us. I agreed with this. We stumble through thigh-deep snow to a cluster of nearby pines, illuminating our path with flashlights. Everything around me is pitch black. The only thing I can see is the empty branches of trees and plants that fall under the eye of the flashlight. I was already frustrated, but as we were slugging to the trees, I suddenly felt as if ice-cold water were being poured down my back. Within moments, a very loud beeping, like those emergency alert broadcasts, began to come from what seemed like everywhere. I shouted in fear and instinctively collapsed into the snow. I waved my flashlight around everywhere, freaking out. The beeping wasn't stopping. My flashlight finally finds Scotty. He's standing still, about 30 feet away, just staring at me. His face is deathly pale. His flashlight had fallen into the snow next to him. In this moment, to my terrified mammalian brain, he looked like a dead body being suspended by invisible meat hooks. I shout his name, but he doesn't move. He begins to open his mouth to try and speak, but he can't form words. Looking at him standing there like that, not able to form words, is making me freak out even more. The beeping noise, which hadn't stopped, is getting louder and more aggressive. It begins to sound more like a machinist shop, like angry grinding and scraping of metal on metal. My muscles felt like they were on fire and wouldn't respond. I tried to force myself to turn away from Scotty. The strange light was behind me now, gently illuminating the snow. What happened next felt like slow motion. There was a shape in the sky, only a few feet above the surface of the snow. It was oblong, wider than it was tall, with no exterior lights or details. It seemed to give off a very pale glow. Whatever it was large and completely silent. I recall being frozen in fear, completely paralyzed. My limbs felt like they were frozen tree stumps, immobile and unresponsive. The mechanized beeping noise rapidly became louder, overpoweringly loud. I tried to scream, but I heard nothing but the beeping, which had completely taken over my senses. I began to have tunnel vision, but I could not look away from this shape, floating silently no more than 100 feet away from me. In the cold darkness, this thing had seized complete dominance over all my senses. My skin began to burn, and it felt like my bones were liquefying in my body. I heard Scotty shout, as if from a great distance. I heard 2 gunshots, muffled and soft. I thought I had gone deaf. At this, the mechanized beeping stopped with the horrific, abortive grunting noise, and the shape silently ascended. The moment it got above the tree line, I couldn't see it anymore, even against the backdrop of stars. Scotty came up behind me, screaming hysterically, grabbing my jacket and pulling me along as he sprinted to the trees. We dove under a tree, kicking out a rudimentary snow shelter. Neither of us slept the entire night. We sat there, huddled in our hollow snow mound, underneath the pine trees, until the sun finally rose, late the next day. We followed our tracks back to Scotty's snow machine. It started on the first try. We drove back to where we had abandoned my snow machine. It, too, started on the first try. We rode back home in a daze. The whole trip was just silence. We've talked about it a couple times since then, but both of us kind of just want to forget about it. So I hope you enjoyed those, and if you did, then let me know which one was your favorite one down in the comments. Do you have one of your own? As always, I have an email in the description, and I also have a PayPal and a Patreon if you would like to support the channel that way. And something funny that I came across while I was researching and looking for stuff for this video was I was reading some stuff about Alaska just to kind of get the gist of what it's like to live there and how different or similar it might be compared to where I live. And this guy said that it was so cold in the winter months where he lives that nobody ever came out and talked to each other. They just said hi if they saw each other at the liquor store. And I was like, damn, I guess we aren't so different after all, because that's exactly how it is here in the wintertime. But anyways, I just thought that was funny. So hope you had a safe new year. Hope you had a good new year. And let's hope 2024 is better in every way. So, I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for pulling up a stump, and thank you for watching.